Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rollwise podcast. I'm Mike, one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my partners in crime, Brent
Hi, everybody.
and Jeff.
Hello.
So, this week we're going to be rolling through some news and we'll touch on a few topics that include RPG tools that you might be excited about to incorporate in your games, some new adventures and games that we're excited about. So, pull up a chair and get cozy while we get this ball rolling. So before we begin, I would like to thank all the new and returning listeners. We appreciate you guys taking some time to listen to our podcast, see what we have to say, leave some comments on all of those kind of things. And if you really like what we're doing, please go ahead and like and subscribe. I hear from other people on YouTube that helps something called an algorithm, and that helps other people find the channel, and they can also engage, say hello, comment, all of that jazz. And if you'd like to, of course, see more of us, don't forget to stop by on Monday nights if you want to see us live stream, because we are playing various games. Right now, we're playing Delta Green. This will be led by Brent. He will be taking us through a nightmare scenario called Last Things Last. Is that what it's called? So Last Things Last. So if you're a player in that, of course, you might be spoiling yourself as we play it. But obviously, the horror will come not only from the scenario, but how me and Jeff approach the scenario. So that is about 8:30 p.m. Pacific time on Mondays. So if you guys are night owls and there's not really much for you to do, stop by, say hello, see how both me and Jeff are going insane. So a few different updates. The first update is The Weird by Monty Cook is fulfilling. So if you were a backer of the Monty Cook Weird supplement that they put out, you can actually download it now. I just picked up my copy today, so I have not had a chance to do it, but I'm really excited to kind of get into the weird stuff that they have, because it's like weird. It's just like, how do you make things a little bit stranger for your fantasy, your sci-fi and all that? It has tables that you can include for, like, oh, you have some weird tech you want to do? Roll this dice. Oh, this tech has now got extra eyes that it shoots or some shit.
So that's a system agnostic resource, or is it for their Numenera game, their cipher system?
My understanding is it's system agnostic. So I just picked it up today, and when I read the backer kit a while ago, basically what it seemed like you could do is the intention of it is that if you wanted to include that kind of weird psychedelic feel to anything in any one of your games, you could use it, because it does approach any type, and you have different tables and stuff like that you can use, so that it's not like not only does it give you some ideas as to how weird can be felt in the game, so like, what do you do to make your game just feel more weird? But it also gives you descriptions that you can incorporate. So if you want to update items so that, a person can have just a strange item that kind of draws, it's just not your normal thing. Places and all of that kind of stuff. So what you can do to make the places just seem a little bit more alien and foreign and all of that kind of stuff. Now, I do know that you guys in one of your games are going to be playing, and it might be it might be fun to incorporate some of these into that game that we're playing on Wednesday. So don't be afraid if all of a sudden my descriptions get surprisingly good and surprisingly eccentric, because I'm borrowing them.
Okay.
I mean, but you guys,
there's also a free preview up. If you look up The Weird on Monty Cook Games, there's also a free preview of it. So that's kind of cool. You can take a look and see if it's something you like too.
Yeah, and if anything, I know that there's a lot of role playing books and everything like that very much can become art books. And I know Brent has a lot of books behind him and all that stuff. I know I have a lot of books that way that you guys can't see off camera. But I don't mind having art books that, people that have strong artistic design and just want to do stuff. And based on my perusal of the book, I really like what they've done and just kind of some of the images that they've created. Like, like a carnival where all the circus animals are basically sitting around a dinner table and the players happen to be the main course under a little dining cover.
I think the art is important. So, yeah, I agree. Owning it just for the art is sometimes inspirational in itself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, because it's just like you fill yourself with different art and it takes you in different directions and all of that kind of stuff. Makes you almost want to play another game of Troika or something like that.
Oh, so slight aside, one of the most disappointing things about the new Troika that I backed,
Oh, okay.
none of the character art is in it. They don't have the character portrait stuff in it anymore. It's just entries of the characters. So
it's kind of that is kind of. I like
it
the
is.
art in Troika.
It was very disappointing.
Because it was because we had played using the Numinous edition, if I
Mhm.
remember correctly, and that's where you saw all the different kind of the acid inspired images and everything. Like
Yeah,
that.
the like block printed
Mm-hmm.
kind of surreal art that by each character, which I think was important to the game. Not only because the character descriptions are so limited, like the art really kind of inspires and informs what like the character might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's sad that that's missing from the newest version of the game.
Is that like all editions, or is that just like the base edition or something?
It's I mean, I got their fancy book. It's
Oh,
even signed.
Nice.
So yeah, but yeah, that was one thing that I was disappointed about the book. So the Newman edition is nice to have just because those character portraits are nice. So
yeah. No, I think I think we've discussed it in the past, but having the art accompany the book is just like a really good way to see how they envisioned the game to play out, even if you don't precisely follow that exact pathway or something. It's totally it just gets you a little bit into the sense of it, because I do remember like Troika, kind of having that Russian-esque art, like folk arts and stuff like
yeah,
that
it's
was in
like
it.
surreal folk art. Yeah,
And the fact that they almost went out of their way not to give you a setting to play in, other than, what did they say, like the humpback ocean sky, some weird shit.
yeah,
Whatever
yeah.
that was.
The crystal spheres and the humpback sky. Yeah, is
Yeah.
what their description is, and it's pretty limited on what the kind of the description they give of the characters too.
Mhm.
So I feel like I think the art was important. So I was kind of surprised that they didn't have they had less art in the newest edition. I thought there would be more, but
Yeah.
it's a nice book. Don't get me wrong. I'm not disappointed or anything. Well, I'm disappointed in that, I guess, the art not being there, but I'm not
Sure.
super upset.
So I wanted to so I pulled up one of the tables from the Weird, because I had just found my copy and pulled it up, and it was like, these are some weird tech item modifications for sci-fi, and one of them is causes orange nosebleeds, as in causes orange juice to come out of your nose, or your blood is now orange, or see what so I just
Both.
Or your nose is bleeding oranges.
it's both a color and a fruit, man. You take it as you will. Now it's time to negotiate. So I think that's
color and a fruit.
I think that's what it gets a little bit interesting. So I'm sorry to hear about the Troika edition, and we'll see if maybe they have separate art books or something that they have put it in.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of a funny observation as I was leafing through the book. I was like, oh, that's kind of sad.
Well, but speaking of art, Free League has also got a new I don't know what to call it, but it would be like it would be a book of mysteries, and this is called the Lost Mountain Saga. And it's written by Eleanor Di Lorenzo, and she is according to this quote says, "As a Swede living in the United States who mostly plays with Americans, the Lost Mountain Saga was a way for me to bring everything that excites me about my own culture and customs to the table, from the sacred ritual of fika to the often romanticized Viking heritage to some of our questionable political movements, and of course the terrifying creatures that used to haunt my dreams when I was a kid."
Wow.
Yep. And so from what I can tell on the preview and everything like that, it looks as though, and this is still in the early access, it's a pre-order with early access. You gain immediate access to the full PDF purchase via drive-through RPG. So if you do buy it, which it's 398 kroner, which whatever that is. And
you can switch that to American, on the website.
Shh. What is that? Oh, $36.26.
Is it written in Swedish?
No, she's living in New York, based on what I read. So, but apparently, Eleanor Di Lorenzo is a podcaster and expanded and modified the stuff from her podcast to actually create this for an official release. Now, like I said, I think the art is done by the same person or at least the style mimics the stuff that you saw in the original Vaesen Nordic horror role-playing game. So it's basically a lot more of the type of art that I really enjoy for this. So I'm probably going to pick it up just because I want to see the book. And I would be kind of excited to see if you guys would play through the 5 mysteries at some point on our other table. I don't know how long that would take us because it does seem as though it's a fairly robust game. So that might be longer.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to run through a. Oh God, I don't know if I've ever run through an entire pre-written campaign. That would be fun. That would be something new.
Well, it's interesting because there's always those like mega adventures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at like some of the adventure paths from like Pathfinder, some of those have kind of reached like legendary status. Like Pathfinder Kingmaker was always one that people say like, oh, this adventure path is really, really awesome to play through. And it is not small. It's a very large campaign that takes you through quite a few levels, if I remember correctly. And then of course that plus the Wrath of the Righteous were both made into games by Owlcat Studio, something like that. And both of them were really fun to play. So I can only imagine if you had a table and you were playing through those, that would be really awesome. Because I mean, first of all, in Kingmaker, you have everything. You have just, land management and all this kind of stuff. It's a very, very large campaign that you go through. I don't know if this would be the same size, but 5 mysteries is quite a saga to get through, because we played through 2 mysteries and that consumed 2 months.
Mm-hmm. No, it would be if it's most of the pre-written campaigns, they last a while. They're pretty beefy, and a lot of times I mean, it's exacerbated by a lot of times the players being idiots. I'll just be blunt and I'll say it.
Exacerbated by the players needing to explore various places that you don't expect them to explore and making decisions that seem contrary to the information presented,
or staying in the wrong hotel.
We've talked about it, but I think you really have to, as players, especially players who have played a lot of other types of games that are way more combat forward. Mm-hmm. You have to learn how to play an investigation game. Like you think you know how to do it because we've all watched movies and TV shows and read books. We think we know how to do it, and we don't. It's possible it was just our group that was really, really inefficient.
Well, it's just a different type of media. Like I said,
right.
I think we've talked about this before. Like when you're watching a mystery, like they aren't really written for you to figure it out before the end of the movie. Like there's ones that are kind of like that, but not really. You're watching a movie to watch this cool guy solve the mystery.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So a role-playing game is completely different than that. You have 5 knuckleheads or 4 knuckleheads trying to use all 4 brain cells and rub them together to get a spark to try and figure out what it is. And so it takes a lot of let's say gentle guidance.
It's true. It's true. So, I mean, I'm not going to give up on the group as like having fun with mysteries. I think that, there is a little bit of deprogramming to be had from the D&D games that all of us ran for so many years that, I mean, I hate to call it deprogramming, but I think that if you play too much D&D and that's all you play, you kind of get into a certain like kind of tunnel vision on how you approach things, especially if you're playing like the D&D modules. I think that if you're playing a D&D module,
100%.
You can kind of fall into like, this is how the module has us run through this specific thing or whatever it is. So, I mean, I'm not going to give up, and I'll probably pick up the game because like I said, if anything, I love having the art for it. And I admit that nowadays, most of my library is becoming PDFs because the physical books tend to be a little bit outside of my price range. Because sometimes they are
they're expensive. Yeah, they're pricey.
They're pretty expensive. But for this Lost Mountain Saga, if you spend the $36.26, you will get the physical order. It will ship in the fall. I'm not sure which fall they mean, because this is Sweden. but then you'll get immediate access to the PDF. So I'll probably do it just because
they're in the northern hemisphere, Mike, so their fall is the same as our fall.
But do they have any other seasons but winter? I mean, truthfully, it's cold.
You would have to ask them. It's probably way more winter summer. Like, you know, I hear that from Australians, right? That they have 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. It's summer and winter.
I'm taking the location out of it, and I'm saying it's a Kickstarter. So when they say fall, do they mean most recent fall? Do they mean now fall, or do they mean future fall, distant somewhere along the way?
Somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years.
This isn't a Kickstarter. This is just on their website, the Free League website.
It's just a pre-order then. It's not a Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's just pre-order. They're not Kickstarting it. It doesn't look like, which is a little bit different than everything else I've seen lately.
Well, yeah, then it could be any day now.
Yeah,
really.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, most of the publishing companies are doing Kickstarters to defray the upfront printing costs. Mm-hmm. Right? They're guaranteeing themselves a certain amount of orders and then printing a certain amount over that they think is going to cover them for other orders, you know, over the next year, 2 years, until they want to print again. So, I mean, right, that's why they're doing it. But traditionally for decades, right, this hobby ran with companies just advertising the product and then selling it as it came out, right? Mm-hmm. So it feels weird now because so many things hit Kickstarter.
Well, yeah, like most of the stuff that most of the new stuff that I buy, I either hear about it first on Kickstarter or I back it on Kickstarter. So that's why I thought it was a Kickstarter. So
I just mostly the it's basically
they published a game like a real publisher.
Wow,
without Kickstarter money. I don't know.
How late 90s, early 2000s.
I don't believe it.
Well, speaking of Kickstarters, just a quick update on the because the Kickstarter finished up for D&D Shorts, the Ryoko's Guide to the Yokai Realms, a 5e tome. Did you see what it ended at in terms of earnings?
Oh no, I did not.
$3.3 million to bring that project to life. So
good for them.
Good. I mean, 26,000 backers. They had a goal of $20,000, and they made 3.3 million more.
I hope somebody got some stretch goals out of that.
I don't know. I'm kind of curious.
Not every offering has stretch goals. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it looks like they had the book put together fairly closely, and now it's like,
now they have to scramble to make shit up to shit. What else are we gonna throw in here? That's a lot of money.
Well, they have a digital deluxe, which includes the PDF, the DAB, digital versions of all cards and handouts, a mini virtual tabletop bundle. So I mean, they seem like they added a lot, but there's a deluxe box which is $295. It looks pretty badass, I'm not gonna lie.
So what's interesting is he made $3 million. Mm-hmm. And the Cohorts Cthulhu game is only at $173,000. So it's just kind of interesting how that range in the industry is. Like Magnus Archives made $2 million, he made $3 million, and they're making a couple. You know, they're almost at 200,000. But it's just kind of interesting.
Well, I think and this is where I think it's I don't want to say star power or anything like that, because like Cohorts Cthulhu is definitely like an interesting game, but I don't know anybody that there's like not a Cohorts Cthulhu podcast that has an audience that follows it that I'm aware of. There's not like a dedicated channel or personality to it.
There's not, but it's just interesting in the role-playing space.
Oh,
that you can get such drastic like it's not a little margin, it's a big gap.
Well, and I think it's just like the people that have the following in terms of YouTube and everything like that, their audiences are the people willing to spend money on content. And I mean, I do have to say the D&D Shorts guy, the one thing I'm really been impressed by is that he's consistently put out good quality product in the form of his newsletters and everything like that. So I think there's a sense, just like Matt Colville, that what he does put out is a quality product. There's not, and I hate to dump on Wizards and everything like that, but after
no, you don't.
After Spelljammer, I was really hesitant to think about anything Planescape. And I know they've been advertising a lot about their Planescape because it's been coming through my feed, and I just haven't had the heart to look at the new art or anything like that, because I know it would just incite me to go buy the content, because a Planescape was one of those, if I were to rank my favorite settings, it's right up there in the top 5. I have a hard time saying one exactly is my favorite setting of all time, just because I'm one of those people that vacillates. Well, today I feel like Dark Sun is my favorite setting because of X, and then tomorrow I feel like Planescape is my favorite setting because of Y.
I watched a few reviews on the Planescape release, and current opinion is it's all right, from what I can understand.
Well, but the worst part about it is after Spelljammer, it's all right. Is a step up, which
that would be a big step up from what I heard, but
yeah,
I purposely haven't watched anything on
at least
Planescape, so
at least there's no suggestion that there may be space combat in Planescape that isn't presented in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I was kind of a little hesitant of is that even if it was just a Planescape primer, I think they gave it a very small release versus the content that's available.
That was what one review said. It said one of the things that one of the reviewers I said, and again, we're shitting on Wizards again. One of the things one of the reviewers said that he said is there's actually more dedicated to Planescape in their books, like page-wise. But the disappointing thing is this is it, basically. Whereas the original Planescape had something like 16 box sets and 14 books and like tons of articles written about it. And so like this is going to be like, it's like Splat. This is all you get.
Yeah.
Same with Spelljammer. Like they're never gonna expand on it, at least in this edition.
Yeah.
And who knows what next edition is gonna be like at all, if there is one.
Well, I mean, so what's funny is that they still are doing the play test for 1D&D, and I know we're not going to dive too deep in this rabbit hole, but I just saw a video from Bob the World Builder. They were talking about long rests. Did you guys catch that at all?
No, I did not. I just saw your message about it earlier off stream.
I was like, and it was just so funny because first of all, like I didn't realize long rests were controversial, but I guess based on how it's written, there was subject to some interpretation. And Bob said he wasn't playing with long rests correctly because he thought it was like an hour of combat, an hour of spell casting or something like that. So like these were the interrupters to your thing. Well, so now that he feels like he understands long rest better, and probably like, because, he had been playing with a different interpretation of it. Now they're changing the long rest rules to something that's like this abomination where it's like, if you're interrupted, you have an interrupted tracker. And so like, if you have 3 interruptions, that means your long rest has to be 3 hours longer. And if you can only have a long rest, you have to have a long rest and then you have to wait 16 hours. And so like, what if you have a guy who has 3 interruptions, then he's 3 hours behind everyone else and then has to wait 3 hours to start his next long rest? It was like, this is not fun. If it's not fun, why include it?
well, no, but if you go back to like how long has long rest and short rest been around? Did it start in 4th? Was it in 3rd?
It's 4th. It was 4th.
It was 4th, and then
there was a rest mechanic in 3.5.
Right.
Well, there's always been a rest mechanic.
Right. Well, no, there has, but the long and short, where you got some stuff back, with
but it wasn't
rest.
so clearly defined until 4th and 5th.
The hard part is there are classes that are essentially absolutely worthless in a dungeon setting after they've used 2 spells in a combat. Like they literally have nothing left to offer the party. Most of the magic user type classes, right?
And that's what makes
at level 1 or 2, they have 3 or 4 spells that they can use until they do a long rest, and the rest of the time they're like, I stab with my dagger and miss. I stab with my dagger and miss.
The rest mechanics are like the weirdest, like non-cinematic / most like strangest mechanic that they put in the game. Like I always had a problem with it where it's like, okay, we're in this dungeon, this intensely hostile environment, and we need to find or like a man-made dungeon, this intensely hostile environment, and we need to find a nook to sleep in for 8 hours. It's like,
well, because you've done 2 combats and suddenly half the party's at like 10% of their hit points, and if you have another combat, everybody's dying. Like there's an issue, there's a design issue here that I think is larger, and I know that's not what we're talking about, so I'm sorry for derailing.
No, it's good conversation.
But I think it's piss poor design is what it comes down to.
Well, it's definitely it creates a very different experience depending on how you play your game. Because first of all, like the encounter day, like how many encounters your character should have over the course of a day before a rest is required is a weird concept to me. Like, I mean, it just like, to me at least, it feels like, you know, if you're hex crawling, for example, hex crawling has its place and can be fun if you really feel like doing a pure exploration, then develop goals that, you know what I'm saying, kind of build from one hex and then build your way out. That has its own place and can be a fun style of game. But like, to say that you get into a dungeon and then like you as the GM have to map out a potential route and be like, okay, well they're going to kill these mobs and that's going to be 6 encounters, so they're going to be weary. But then because it's a dungeon in D&D, these mobs don't have patrol routes, or they just statically stay in their one room.
Well, yeah,
because is 6 encounters a real thing? Sorry, Brent, go ahead.
No, I don't. Go ahead and answer. Go ahead and say what you were going to say.
If 6 encounters is a real thing and I've got 30 hit points, that means I can get hit once an encounter, because like 5 damage isn't that much. And the way that shit's designed, you take a lot more damage than that. Even with some healing and some healing potions, it's not like I've got 100 healing potions and I'm just constantly... there are issues with the game and how you recharge stuff. Like, so they might as well just make it a video game where after combat you just get everything back.
Well, and I wouldn't say that 6 encounters is the right thing, because what they do in D&D is they do what's called an adventuring day, which is based on the average conditions, you know, like average luck. So excluding Brent, who's definitely an outlier, this is what you would typically do. So like, if your adventuring day for first level characters comes out, is you would have one day would be 300 XP per day per character. Now, what I think that people run into that's a little bit tricky about this is that it's how many threats you encounter. And I think that threats, when they're only recognized as being monsters, you get a very samey feel. And that's where I think that Dungeons and Dragons and players that I've encountered and I've read about don't necessarily use the broad spectrum of threats. So like hazardous environments aren't considered, aren't necessarily well thought out of as a threat or an obstacle and stuff like that. And those have their own experience they should be assigned to. But I think that if you just said, okay, well, it's 300 experience per day per person for monsters, I think you get a very weird adventuring day, in my opinion.
Okay.
Well, it straddles that weird thing that D&D does, which is this: we're kind of simulationist, we're kind of not, we're kind of narrativist, and it tries to balance those two things. And sometimes there's just shit that stands out as the weirdest way to balance the two, because you can't. Like, a simulationist game is, we travel, we eat, we try and avoid the cold, that sort of thing. Whereas a non-simulationist game is, we do an 8-hour rest and get all our shit back and then move on, or a 4-hour rest or whatever. And like, balancing those two is hard. I mean, and then the whole concept of like a number of encounters per day before you rest, like trying to balance that is almost like, that's a insane decision rule, in my opinion, because there's almost no way that you can do that safely. And again, it supports something that I don't like, which is the perfect party balance. You need to have the perfect party balance. You need the right items for level. So like, if you have level 5 characters and they don't have level 5 equipment, your balance goes out again. Like, if you're kind of a stingy dungeon master, not naming names, and you don't give out magic items like you're supposed to, they're going to be weaker than the monsters at that level. And then there's everything then there's action economy and all that stuff that you have to balance too. And like, so.
Yeah. But in my defense, in our Fabula Ultima game, I am giving you guys experience every session. because I'm that.
Because
nice.
that's only the Fabula Ultima rules.
Yeah, it's only because the book tells you
it's
to.
It's written in the rules.
Implicitly.
5 experience per session. Period. End of story.
The rules help me look generous. How about that? but needless to say, I think it's an interesting design choice, and I'll be curious to see how that looks in the final 1D&D game. I mean, because at the end of the day, I'll still look at 1D&D or the chimera that they create at the end of whatever this playtest thing is. Because I haven't, and for anybody that's listening that's like really invested in the 1D&D playtest process, continue being invested. I mean, it's your game. Like if that's how you want to spend your time, and that's what you want to do is invest in hopefully making a really good product that aligns with how you like to play the game. Fine. We're not here to talk about like how that's good or bad. What we're saying is that for our table, we just struggle with some of the concepts that they present, just because it's not how we play our game as well.
And I will apologize ahead of time, but it brightens my soul to talk bad about Wizards and D&D sometimes. So it makes me happy. And I know that's terrible, but it's true. It's just not the game. Like, I will play in D&D games and I will have a lot of fun, but man, it is the last thing that I would want to run right now. Not the last thing. I can think of other things I would like to run less.
Yes.
But it's down there.
I couldn't possibly imagine
given how widely distributed it is. It is, yeah. It is unnaturally low on the list.
Yeah, for me. But I support people. I still like talking about it, even though I talk bad about it. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy the game when I play it. It just isn't something that I would be like. For me, when I look at a game, I say, what game would I be interested in running? Because most of the time, that's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I used to say in my gaming group, anytime you could think of a game that you want to play, guess what? You're probably going to have to run it, not play it. So,
Yeah.
So that's the thing, but yeah, I just think, and it's that weird simulationist versus narrativist thing that it's a line they've always tried to straddle, and sometimes they
do it better than others.
Crotch themselves on it.
That's probably the best way to put it. And so it'll be interesting because based on what I remember from Bob's video is that he basically said that like with the new long rest rules, and I don't know if he mentioned which playtest it was. I was kind of listening to it in passing. But it's like during your long rest, you now get all of your hit dice back. So, instead of having all the hit dice you spent instead of half, all of your stat negatives are gone. Like long rest pretty much invalidates a lot of types of statuses and stuff. So it's like, the long rest is kind of your panacea for how your characters get back to full fighting strength. So getting a long rest drastically changes your but
that's why they're
position.
Making it harder. Like you just physically can't do it. Because I have seen groups that it's like they do 2 or 3 encounters and then they have to take they do a short rest the first time, then they've got a long rest, and then they do another 2 or 3 encounters and they've got a long rest again, or everybody's going to die.
Or they do an encounter and then long rest, because the instinct as players is just throw all your shit at whatever's dangerous. Like
just go supernova, effectively.
Right? Like you're never going to be like, well, I could kill all these monsters with one spell, but I better not. Like that usually doesn't. Like players don't think that way.
No, well, I've tried hoarding, my resources, and it's like it feels like I'm not helping the party kill stuff.
Exactly.
I made the last combat go 8 rounds longer because I refused to do anything other than a basic attack.
Right.
And then one person almost died because they got critted. Like there's a lot that goes into it, but a lot of times it feels like every time I use something cool, the encounter was a dud. And every time I wait, I probably should have just fired off everything.
Right. Well, and the thing is, so here's the other thing that I worry about a rule like this, where like they're like almost suggesting that you interrupt their long rests. At what point does that feel like the GM's just being a dick? like you're encouraging that old school like dungeon master is in conflict with the players. Like, oh nope, more skeletons interrupt your nightly rest.
Guess what? The cleric now can't get back all of those healing spells that you're so desperately needed.
Well, like I said, I said in D&D, if you ever want to kill your party, if you ever want to TPK your party, honestly, fucking attack them while they're sleeping. Attack them while the paladin has all of his armor off, while the fighter's away from his weapon, while the wizard doesn't have all his spells or his magic shit. Like, just attack them while they're sleeping. Because, like, 9 times out of 10, you'll kill most of the party.
Well, they all claim they sleep in their armor.
But, well, that's why the armor penalties are there.
Right, and then the GM's like, well, you aren't getting good rest, so you don't get the benefits of the long rest.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, since we've gone into this 5e stuff, I would like to point out that if people have the DMG and they really aren't happy with the long rest before it becomes codified and whatever it turns out to be on 1D&D, there are 3 things that you consider. As the first thing is that long rest, if you harrow your players and you don't allow them to have a long rest, you can start giving them exhaustion levels, which I think is a nice threat in situations where you want to build tension, because exhaustion levels suck. I think you just die after 6 levels of exhaustion, but you start losing. Like you start losing extreme. Some really, like you start getting some pretty negative things, and it can be a pretty bad spiral if you go that route. But I think it adds some interesting tension that isn't just such a, like, oh, I have to find ways to like make my party have a harder time. Well, exhaustion levels are a great way to do that. But there are 2 variants in the Dungeon Master's Guide about how you can go about resting. One is called the Epic Heroism. Have you guys heard about these, or do you know about them? So the epic heroism kind of assumes you want epic heroes that are basically full force for every fight you throw at them. A short rest is 5 minutes, and a long rest is 1 hour. And so it basically, if combat's going to be routine and you want your players to go against super dangerous monsters and everything like that, this is the way that you can kind of compensate and have like smack drag out battles of epic levels every time. I don't know if I would necessarily appreciate that type of dungeon crawl where it was just like every fight felt like a boss fight and they just had to go all out every time. Like I hate to say this, but sometimes those kung fu movies where you have like the weak monsters that you just kind of like sweep to the side and like 7 people go, that has its place too. But the second one is actually called gritty realism. And it's basically the one where you say, fuck you in your long rest abilities, because a short rest is 8 hours and a long rest is 7 days.
Jesus Christ.
So basically the premise of it is that you can only, like when you're adventuring,
you can only short rest when you're adventuring.
Only short rest, and you have to basically go back. I didn't realize that broke Brent. Fuck.
Yeah, it did. It did.
So basically you go out, you adventure, and then you have to take a vacation when you get back.
Yes.
Well, the premise is that, you can never really rest while in a dungeon. Jesus. You need to go back to town, restock your supplies, get in a good, comfortable bed before you do all that stuff. And so it's the campaign that makes you more carefully ration how you approach various encounters. And it may not be good for that previous example that I provided for the epic one, where every encounter is like massively difficult and kind of stretches you.
All that means is that your party goes out and fights one guy in one part of the dungeon, goes home, rests for a week, and then goes back the next week and goes, okay, on to the next part of the dungeon.
Well, the problem is then as the DM you go, well, that Hellmouth you had 2 days to close. Fully opened.
Oh man, that's the most hilarious rule I've ever heard in my life. Like it's not even a D&D. You're not even playing D&D at that point, really. You're playing. No. I don't know. You might as well run Harn or like Ironsworn or what is
something else that doesn't involve a lot of consumable abilities.
Riddle of Steel. That's the one that I was thinking of. The one that is like where it's like, oh no, I'm hurt. I need to take 6 days real time, like actual out of game time to heal my arm.
Yeah, I mean and I think the interesting part about the gritty realism is it kind of encourages alternate solutions to fighting. Like it turns fighting into a last resource, last resort approach to your team. And I have to say, I played a game that used a variation of this, because there are homebrew variations of this all over the place. Right. So we used a variation of this gritty realism, and I appreciated it until I died. Right. because there were some moments, and my character went out the best heroic sacrifice, very much like everyone at the table is like, thank you, you saved my character for certain death, and I'm sitting there impaled on a spike. It was a great way to go out, but it definitely changed how the group of people approached everything. It didn't make everyone so combat murder hobo happy, let's say, because in his variation, you couldn't actually rest outside of a town. So if you wanted a long rest, you had to be inside a town to do so.
See, you said that it makes combat the last resort, and I'm like, in my mind, it makes honor the last resort, because I would be doing things like, one guy stands there with a white flag on a stick. The rest of the party circles around behind. And the second that the enemy hesitates from seeing the white flag, we all stab them in the back. Because that seems like the way to try to survive the best.
I just don't think it sounds like a D&D game at that point.
It sounds like a drive-by shooting.
It sounds like, it just sounds like I don't know, like that would be a lot different.
It is. And
the only game I can think of that I played, but like that was like Shadowrun 4th edition. If you got hurt, like really hurt, like you were in the hospital for months because like you had gunshot injuries and stuff like that. And so like we played a day. We used to run Shadowrun games where you do a day. We called it the day in the life of, where it's like you narrate your character's day over day. We've tried that a couple times, but I had another friend who did it, and that's where I got the idea from. But in that game, it was like, oh well, your rigger just got a shotgun shot to the leg. He's going to be in the hospital for a month and a half, and so like he had to make another character to do Shadowruns and stuff with us.
To continue playing.
So like I can't even imagine like. I can't imagine a medieval setting like that. It would be hard for me to, not medieval, but a Dungeons and Dragon-esque fantasy setting to be like that.
Well, I mean, I like I said, I played in that game, so I know what it's like. It's very different, very, kind of gritty, grim, dark, like things seem hopeless, especially like, because this is what was really funny about the game, is that as we traveled through the adventuring world, we're like, you see some orcs camped across the river. And we're like, well, they couldn't be bad orcs. That guy has a really sharp looking sword. We better go around. Like,
wizards are useless.
They definitely but not necessarily. You start relying a lot more on things like scrolls and wands and all that kind of stuff to provide you with that additional support.
Did he give those out like candy?
Assuming the GM's
you could buy them, in towns and stuff like that. And the access to magic was based on rarity, so you couldn't obviously get super high level stuff, but like low level things you could get access to. Just the problem that we ran into is he was even stingier than I was with gold. So
that would be my point. It's like. You might as well say
you can buy that, but it costs 10,000 gold. You just for the last week of work got 40.
No, it was the same. It was the same cost in gold. It just was the fact that we didn't get 10. A lot of. You had to pool your resources.
Yeah, you might as well. I mean, like you might as well most magic use. You might as well say, yeah, it's real rare to be a wizard in this, and you might as well say this world is really rare, because like just cantrips. Like most of your wizards are just going to be doing cantrips all the time.
And that's what a lot of wizards do, anyways. They don't necessarily use that. Like hexblades are they?
Well, that's a warlock, not a wizard. What I'm saying is warlocks, sorcerers are useless, and everyone is going to play a warlock because it's like, oh, short rest, I can still blast things.
Yeah, very much. So, I know we went down a rabbit hole on that. But that's just some
gamer talk, though.
That was just,
and you made me laugh, and you made me laugh more than I've laughed, and maybe.
It's a good thing he wasn't drinking, or water would have shot out of his nose all over his camera.
7 days. That was a shock. I didn't expect.
You were like 8 hours, 3 days, 8 hours.
I didn't expect a long rest is a week.
Hey, long is in the name, Brent.
Man, I don't get a long rest very often in my life ever.
No, it's been years since Brent had a long rest.
It explains so much, really.
You need to recharge those spell slots.
Yeah, it explains why his resources look so drained.
It's true. It's true. So,
Wow.
so needless to say, I think that can segue into other resources. And these aren't necessarily system agnostic, but I think you can use them for any system with a little bit of tweaking. Is that there's a newsletter I get from another creator that pointed me to Dyson Logos's blog, and it's basically about creating maps and stuff like that. And I have to say, based on how much stuff we've done, Theater of the Mind, I've kind of done both approaches. And I don't know if you guys have strong feelings on this, but I really feel like you should have a general idea of a dungeon mapped, even if it's not like, even if it's not fully fleshed out, just so that if your PCs go into a dungeon that is either planned or unplanned, there should at least be a general idea as to how the dungeon is
I
shaped,
like that.
and all that kind of stuff.
I like that. Even if you're not hex crawling and literally
Mhm.
going, from square to square, hex to hex,
Mhm.
and revealing stuff, I think you should have an idea of the terrain that you're dealing with and
the
stuff.
passageways, so that
Yeah.
like if you like with the stuff that you guys had, like I said, I just made it very simple, but at least that idea was in my head, and kind of a soft sketch was put out about the Simon Says game that I was running you guys through. But even more complicated dungeons like that slime that I had you guys approach in the Fabula Ultimate game, that dungeon was created. It just wasn't very large because I didn't want it to be a huge time consumption or resource consumption for what you were doing. I just wanted you guys to have one thing, test out a couple encounters in there, and then kind of skedaddle. But I was like, well, it would be easy if you had at least something that you can do that kind of like was a basic starting place. And this dungeon, what was it called? It was the Dyson dodecahedron, all that kind of stuff. The person has a Patreon, and they put together about 1,200 maps that if you really felt the need, you could probably borrow a map, change it for your own thing. And all these maps are super professional. I'll put a little link in the description for the show notes and everything like that. So if you are interested in taking a look, it looks like you can just literally download the map and use them for your games. Some of them are tile sets, so you can kind of rearrange them and everything like that. So, I mean, huge props to this creator for being so generous with the community. So if you do like their work and want to support them, I'd say jump on Patreon, throw a few dollars their way, let them get some coffee, some more art supplies, all that kind of stuff. And the other resource that I had was a random tables resource from Random Dash Encounters, or I should say it's a random encounter table from the Random Tables RPG site. And they have hundreds of table ideas, so that if you happen to be in a tavern and you want to roll a D100, you could get various things like, a group of humans is arguing whether or not they should help a nearby injured gnome. And so it's just a prompt, right, for you to share with your players, and then use that as kind of your lead off if you don't have an idea prepared for an adventure or something. And there's a lot of people that really embrace tables. So this seems like a perfect thing to do if you really want to incorporate some random elements into that, so that you don't, as the DM, have to generate every idea that your players are going through, and you kind of have an element of improvisation during your role play. They say it's for 5th edition, but I mean, you could easily have that for any game, unless the game, of course, doesn't include gnomes. Then insert random other species, race, ancestry, or whatever the fuck you want to call it.
You're accosted by short guys.
Yeah, you see a group of people arguing whether or not they should help a short person.
A group of short people.
It's a nearby injured short person.
Exactly.
I mean, and so it's like and of course it's like one of them is like a large diamond falls from the ceiling, landing in front of players. What do you do? That's a good question. I thank the gods for giving me a diamond, those kind of things.
Exactly.
So I mean, it at least, like I said, takes a little bit of the lift off the DM to create every idea, and gives you some stuff that can probably be just as fun to work through and all that. And there are dozens of these tables for every type of environment, so it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's a good resource.
Yeah.
Neat.
So I think what we can do is we'll kick it off to Jeff, because Jeff, before we wrapped up this podcast, you wanted to at least talk about one or two games. One was Night Train.
Yeah,
and so share us a little bit about
I've
that.
I've got two. Well, yeah, I've got two games I want to talk about really quick. One on Kickstarter right now, the Deadlands game, which is a Weird West role-playing game that's been around for quite a while, has always been near and dear to my heart, is re-releasing one of their probably staple pre-generated module, I guess, adventure. If you've ever been to a convention and somebody is doing Deadlands, there's a chance that Night Train was played. So basically, just so that people know, the Night Train lurks along the tracks of the West, pulling in after dark to unleash its hellish cargo of starving feral vampires on unsuspecting towns along the rails. For decades, Night Train has terrorized tabletops and conventions. What will you do when the deathly whistle blows? Can your posse survive the onslaught? Many others have tried and failed. So it's I don't know if any of you guys ever played what was it? Is it Tomb of Horrors with D&D? Where like most people die.
Yeah, the original Tomb of Horrors. I never played it at a table, but I have read it. Used it for inspiration because it's a pretty iconic D&D modular adventure.
Yeah, so Night Train is that for Deadlands. If you have any love for Western RPGs or a Western horror crossover, the Kickstarter is pretty cool. They're using the Savagelands system, and it looks pretty neat. You also get the rest of the Dime Store novels. Deadlands released these books that were like half fiction and then half adventure, with the characters, and that's where Night Train started. So you actually get quite a bit of content on this, and if that's your kind of thing, I would check it out. I have given Mike the link. I hope we can get it into the description.
Yeah.
Just if somebody wants to back the Kickstarter, there's still 20 days left as of the time we're doing this, so it'd be a little less by the time we post this. But Night Train is one of those things. I might back it and just at some point run the group through it, because it's really one of those things. It's just like how long can you survive? Because most likely you're dying.
And it's super iconic.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and if you need more incentive as you look through this, what they seem to have done is they did the Night Train using the Savage Worlds system for the first time ever, but then they also included a sequel in the box set, which is For Whom the Whistle Blows, an all new adventure. So that's kind of it's kind of interesting that they included an entirely new adventure on top of that. So, I mean, there's really a lot that goes into it. So for $25, you get quite a bit of content, especially if you like Savage Worlds. I think it'd be fun. So I'm 100% ready for you to back this so that you can run us through this, because I like playing.
Yeah, no, I think it would be cool. Might be one of those things that you try out once a year. You know what I mean? Like a New Year's Eve game or something, just to see. Give people a year to strategize, because it's like that plan didn't work at all. The other one is a really small game. It's actually a reskin of another game. It's available on Drive-Thru RPG. It's called Cocaine Owlbear. It is a reskinning of Honey Heist, which is a fun little game. There's only 5 pages of rules. Price isn't an issue here because it's $3 to get the PDF on Drive-Thru RPG. Basically, you're a woodland creature that finds a dead guy and some cocaine and ingests the cocaine, and suddenly you become sentient. You're looking through the dead guy's stuff and you find this heist plan to get more cocaine because now you're addicted. I realize this is adult. I'm sure Honey Heist is not this adult, but this was done with the blessing or permission, at least, of the Honey Heist creator. And so the heist is really detailed, and you and your companions try to steal the cocaine.
Steal more cocaine so you can retain your human intelligence.
Exactly. I watched Cocaine Bear. It had its moments, and it wasn't great, but it had its moments. I would play Cocaine Owlbear, and for $3, I mean, what? That's a candy bar nowadays. Like that's
somebody
a
wrote
candy
it.
bar that feels like it's half the size of the candy bars.
Somebody wrote it. They deserve $3 for it. At
Yes,
least.
they do.
Yeah.
They do.
Well-
And again, I've provided Mike the link on Drive-Thru RPG.
Sure. Yeah. No. So only thing I have to say is, as an advisory thing, we don't really condone the use of doing
No.
hard or heavy drugs. Whatever's legal in your state, town, country, that's what we condone. Anything outside of that, obviously, including
Right.
cocaine, probably should be on the no snort list. I think cocaine is a snorting type drug.
Yeah,
I've never
they even
done.
have a disclaimer that the game is satirical in nature and by no means encourages anyone to ingest any illegal or unhealthy substances.
And let's be honest, the thought of 4 woodland squirrels trying to steal a bundle of cocaine is pretty funny.
It's hilarious.
I think it is. I could understand how that's not everybody's sense of humor, but hilarity ensues comes to mind.
Well, I think the problem is that if you have two types of people that laugh at Happy Tree Friends and people that don't.
Okay, sure.
And I feel like this is the same boat.
I think, yeah, there you go. That was a good wrap up.
I feel like I should make a comment, but I am not going to.
Those are the 2 items that I found for this week.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
There's 2 types of people: the people that understand Johnny the homicidal maniac, and the people that don't.
See,
that's a dated reference now.
I love how if you take that to the logical conclusion, there are 2 types of people in the world: the type of people that divide the world into 2 groups, and the type of people that don't.
Exactly.
Shh. Hey, you know what? You leave my analogies alone.
Okay.
Happy Tree Friends doesn't come up often enough at all.
No, it doesn't. Happy Tree Friends was brilliant. That was a great reference, and I hope that we had a few people that were watching until this point to. If you've ever seen Happy Tree Friends, leave us a comment about what your favorite episode was, what your favorite part of the show was. There's
a lot that we that we could talk about when we get into some of these darker comments. But what we're going to do is we're going to leave all the horror and darkness for Monday nights because that's when both I and Jeff are going to be investigating ourselves into insanity. I really don't know if that's the right way to say it, but we're basically going to see how these characters perish or solve a mystery. One of the 2.
Those are your 3 options. There's go insane, die, or win,
or solve the adventure.
But even if you win, you go insane, right? Eventually,
yeah.
Yeah.
You're just prolonging the insanity.
Sometimes winning is going insane.
Well, that's true. Then you forget the horrors that you've witnessed,
or you get really cool magical powers.
Okay, that's fair.
So, well, I actually think that's we've reached the end of our hour. Do you guys have any last topics or reminders you wanted to give out to the faithful that have made their way all the way to the end of this, hopefully on purpose, or if just in the background?
just hopefully. If it's not on purpose, I'm fine with it.
If you never played Delta Green and you've heard about it and want to see what it's about, watch the live stream on Monday. No, Delta Green is a great game.
No, what I would say is if you've never played Delta Green and you're interested, there's hundreds of other people that will run it better who have done real plays. You should go listen to them first. But if you like us,
go ahead and watch us.
You should also listen to ours.
Yeah, I'm not saying we're the best, but we'll have fun.
Yeah. Well, I hope we'll have fun. We will definitely be going.
Sort of fun, I'm sure.
And also, just in case, I just wanted to mention this. I was searching around, and there's a game called Perfectly Normal Animal Village Simulator. It's basically kind of like Happy Tree Friends, and I think it says it's a low-powered, cute animals with folk horror, all that kind of stuff.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to see it's only $5 on itch, so I might go pick that up just because I'm curious as to what it is. So yeah. So
What was that
but
called again? Perfectly Normal what?
Perfectly Normal Animal Village Simulator. It seems kind of meta already in the title, so I'm sure the people who wrote this are kindred spirits. I can put the thing in chat too for you. So with that, Jeff, why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of us? Other than commenting on YouTube, where can they find us?
You can find us on Threads, Twitter /X, Facebook and YouTube at Rollwise. And if you'd like to get us by email, it's rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
I think that's Brent. Sign us off.
My turn.
Yeah, hit it.
I want to take a moment to thank everybody that has commented. We will do our best to answer those comments as quickly as possible and as intelligently as possible. So thank you for leaving the comments. Please comment, like, subscribe, comment, all the things that we've already mentioned. But if you do comment, we will have a conversation with you. So we enjoy it. So thank you very much, everybody that's commented so far, and the positive things that have been said thus far. So thank you. And as always, I forgot my line. As always, roll well and roll wise and be safe out there. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.